Welcome everyone to the Rise podcast. Kwesi Millington here. My guest today is Rena Romano, and I'm just going to do a short introduction because she has an amazing story, and we're just going to go from there. Rena is a TEDx speaker, keynote speaker, and speaking coach, and she's honored to advocate for adult survivors. And I'm not even going to go any further than that because I want to get into your story. I'll just explain briefly that Rena and I know each other as world-class speaking coaches. We both got certified under world champion of public speaking, Craig Valentine. But I looked up her story and I said, okay, I have to have her on this resilience podcast because she is the definition of resilience, and you'll see why when we talk about her story. So first, Rena, welcome. Thank you for being on the podcast. And this is, of course, we're filming on video, but we're on audio too, of course. And thank you for being here.
My pleasure, Kwesi. So good to see you too.
Yeah.
And I was honored when you approached me and invited me to be here with you tonight. So thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, and it's one of these things, you meet people virtually, or you meet people from being part of the same group or knowing some of the same people. We have mutual friends, great people, and
Yes.
and we just eventually meet in person. And I think a lot of people are like that now, and I guess especially in the world we're in. So what I want to do is just basically start by telling me your background and maybe a little bit about your upbringing, and then I want you to lead into the story that you stand on now.
Okay. It's my pleasure too. Yeah. Yes, I am a certified speaking coach and put props out there to Craig Valentine and my friend Catherine, who we mutually know.
Absolutely.
But thank you for having me on the show. It took me many years to find my voice. I am a SurThriver of incest and adult rape as a young adult. And I was silenced for many, many years. Now I am a SurThriver, and I trademarked that word in the United States because survivor and thriver really just didn't sit with me because I am not ashamed of my past. And so that word SurThriver, people are like, wow, what SurThriver of what? So it initiates a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I am also an advocate for survivors of child sexual abuse and sexual assault and domestic violence. And that is what my platform is now. And becoming a speaking coach, I started Toastmasters to find my voice as a speaker because I wanted to share my story. Kwesi, I didn't know what it looked like. I had no vision of how it was going to end up, what it would look like. But I knew I wanted to share my story, something, the universe, divine intervention was pushing me, and started at Toastmasters, became a public speaking coach myself. And now I'm helping others find their voice, just like you.
Amazing. And yeah, we have mutual friends and mutual connections. So, you go where you want to go with the story, but I want to take you back and please explain, your childhood coming up, and then how you got into surviving and becoming a SurThriver, because I'm sure the positivity that you exude now, you weren't always in that space. So let's go back to how you built that.
Yes, I was starting to be molested at the age of 4. And of course, a child at the age of 4, you don't have any language for what is happening, but it was a family member. And I loved this family member, and the abuse went on for many years. And then again, as an adult, a young adult, I was raped in my home. So I didn't find my voice, and people, I had a lot of friends and family members that were shocked when I came out with my story. Because I tell people I could have won an Oscar for how I hid my reality and my truth. But as a child, I didn't want to be responsible for breaking up the family. And I was afraid to tell on this family member because I knew in a way that it would break up the family. It's a lot of responsibility for a child. But Kwesi, something kept pushing me, something kept me going. And my mother used to say, to thy own self be true. She didn't know what was happening because she went off to work, but she was my biggest supporter when I did finally tell my family. And she helped me get the therapy that I needed. And again, was my biggest supporter. And I just knew someday I'd write a book. Mm-hmm. I also have to tell you and your listeners, I also knew that one day I was going to share my story on the Oprah Winfrey show.
Yes, yes. And I did notice that you did. Yes.
And yes, I did. I didn't know how or why or when, but I just, something in me, deep in my soul, I knew that I would be sharing my story on an international stage, sitting next to my mentor, because it was Oprah Winfrey, watching her show through the years, that really saved my life. And I got to tell her that on stage too. So that was a huge moment
too, isn't it? Isn't that a shared background? Isn't she a victim of sexual abuse as a youngster as well?
Yes, she is. Yes, she is.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you, because I mean, so many questions pop into my mind as
go for it.
This story. So at 4 years old, this happens to you. And for those of us who don't really understand, what's happening mentally to you? Do you know what's going on? How long did it go on for? And, you know, was there anybody that even remotely had an idea of what was happening to you?
Well, yeah, as I said earlier, at the age of 4, I'm having these things done to me, and I had no language. I didn't even know what was sex was, you know, at the age of 4. And then as the years went on, I was forced to do drugs. I was forced into pornography. And once again, I loved my brother, but I hated my abuser. And so I couldn't tell. And this was many, many years ago. We didn't talk about child sexual abuse or rape or things like that. And the Me Too movement has really broken the lid off of that lately. So thank goodness we can talk about these things, and we are. But nobody knew. Somebody found out what was happening because they found the pictures, and I'm not going to get into that story, but and tried to tell my mother what was going on, but you know, we were so afraid of this person. Mm-hmm. You don't, when you're dealing with a narcissist, a psychopath, and I'm the victim, I don't know how to deal with a person like that. But something kept me going, and something kept telling me that I had to live. There was a reason that I was living, that I had to keep going. I didn't know what it was, didn't know what it looked like. But so here I am with you, and this is what it looks like now. And I'm excited.
And that's amazing that you're here now. You mentioned that as an adult you were raped. Is that a separate story? Is it the same person, or is that a separate incident altogether?
It was a separate,
and then get your life together, and then this happened.
No, I was still I had not recovered, and I was working at a landscaping firm, and one of my colleagues, he was married with children, and he always sexually harassed me. My boss was sexually harassing me. A friend of mine had been raped a couple of months prior, and she went to the police. And again, this was many, many years ago. And so she was blamed for her rape. Well, this man broke into my home while I'm sleeping in my bed, the one place where you think you should be safe. And the next day I had to get up and go to work because I paid my own bills. You know, I was a young adult in my early 20s then. And I couldn't tell my boss the next day because my boss was sexually harassing me. And of course, I couldn't go to the police because of what happened to my girlfriend many months earlier. So I was on my own. I felt alone. I felt broken. And like I said, I told Oprah, Winfrey, watching her show and her talk about her abuse and talk more about abuse and rape and these issues really made me see that what I was doing in my life later on, that maybe I should get help.
Yeah. And how old are you at this time? When
I reached out for help when I was 34.
When you were 34.
I called a crisis line and I was like, I thought I had contemplated my suicide. And because I was in such shame and such pain about the incest, about the rape. And I thought it was all my fault because they made me feel I was responsible. And I didn't want to die, Kwesi. I wanted to live, but I didn't know how to live with the shame and the pain. So finally I called the crisis line and I need help. Yeah. And they helped me. Thank goodness.
And I'm glad that you did. And I guess if you have any words to say to someone who may be in that situation that hasn't called a crisis line, do you wish you called sooner? And what would you say to your younger self to get that person to seek help sooner? Because chances are, it sounds like you wanted to at one point, and it took you a while to get to the point where you'd reach for help. What would you say to someone who may be in that situation? You probably have as a speaker, but or even your younger self.
What I would say, back then, I'm in my 60s now. This was many years ago. We didn't talk about these things. Only did, Oprah Winfrey and Phil Donahue and Sally Jesse Raphael back, years ago, they were coming out and talking about these issues. And what I would tell my younger self is I did the best I could. And I am not ashamed of my past, because what I look at, Kwesi, is I look at my courage, my strength, and my tenacity to persevere during and after being molested, being raped for all those years. That's what I concentrate on, not the crime. I used to be in such shame about what happened to me. And I got tired of being ashamed of crimes I didn't commit. And I share that in my TEDx talk. I grew tired of being ashamed of crimes I didn't commit. And I was tired of the shame sabotaging my life. I wasn't being abused anymore, but I was self-abusing. Alcohol, drugs, those things. Yeah. And I got tired of it.
Yeah.
So what I would tell folks nowadays, you're not alone. There are places to call now. There are places that deal with this type of trauma. Back then, they didn't as much. But that's why I speak out, because their help is there now. So a local crisis center here in the United States is 211 or 911, or you can find your local crisis center, sexual abuse crisis center. Call. They're there to help. There's no judgment.
And that's an important thing. There's no judgment. And we're going to talk about Oprah. I'm going to ask you more about that in a minute. I do want to know about that. I want to just rewind just a little bit. You said you couldn't call the police after the adult rape, and I didn't understand that. And just explain why you didn't call. Was that something you decided yourself because you felt guilty? Or what was the reason that you didn't call the police to report the rape?
Well, one reason was because of what happened to my girlfriend months prior. They blamed her.
Okay.
They blamed her. Okay. Right. And my rapist made me feel like it was my fault. He told me, he says, I'm going to come and get you sometime. And he told me that he would hurt me if I told anyone. And I was afraid of him.
Okay.
So, what had happened then, and excuse me, him threatening me, I didn't want to go tell. And, after what happened to my friend, I felt so alone. I didn't want to be blamed, because victim blaming and shaming is not as prevalent now as it was then, but it still happens. And that's why people wait so many years to get help.
because they almost like a feeling like you brought this on yourself. And is that where the shame comes from for someone who like doesn't understand? Because it's not your fault, and it's not your fault now, but at the time, why do you take on that shame or that feeling of blame for something that you were a total victim of?
That's gaslighting from the narcissist. It's them telling me that I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, that this is my fault, that this is happening to me. They make you feel like you are the bad person, that you are bad, and that's why this is happening. And that's how they twist you. And that's how they twist the situation to ensure our silence. Mm-hmm. I know I have a lot of friends that their perpetrator told them that their families would be killed if they said anything. I mean, come on. Okay. You don't want to be responsible for a family member being murdered. Even though they may not do that, we don't know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The manipulation and the threatening is real. It feels real. It's a weapon they use to keep you silent. Tell me now how you go from, okay, you're contact the crisis center, you're trying to heal your life. Take us on the path from there to Oprah.
Well, it was because of Oprah. And I did tell her that her and her show saved my life. And I knew that one day I would tell her. I don't know how to tell.
That divine intervention, just came on. So how did they even define you?
Exactly. Well, so I went through therapy. I was in group therapy for a couple of years. And then I told my mother I was going to write my book, His Puppet No More. And I waited because telling my story in my book would have to share some secrets of my mother. And I didn't want to do that while she was still alive because it would embarrass her and it would hurt her. So I didn't want to do that. And then in the end of 2006, I lost my job, as many people around the world, from the financial crash. In 2007, my husband looked at me and he says, well, I think it's time to write that book that you've been talking about for the last 20 years. Because sadly, my mother had passed the year before and I had no more excuses not to write it. And he said, that's your job now. Write the book. So it took me 3.5 years to write the book. But with Oprah, she was sharing stories. She shared her story of being abused. And she was inviting the audience to send in emails sharing our stories. And if we thought our story was Oprah worthy, send an email.
You were in the audience and she's...
No, I wasn't in the audience. Her TV audience.
Yeah.
So around the world. So send an email. So I just knew, Kwesi, that I was going to be on Oprah. I knew my story would get me on Oprah. And so that I could say, thank you for saving my life, because it was her show that made me realize I should call for help. And so I told my family and friends for like 2 years, I'm going to be on the Oprah Winfrey show. And they're like, oh, sure, Rena. Yeah. Right. Huh. Yeah. And I'm like, no, I am going to be on Oprah. So I sent the letter in, or the email, and shared my story. And I get a call from Harpo Studios. And it says that it was a director. And she said, we're thinking about doing this show and we would love for you to come on, and we're going to air it on this date. I said, well, I'm sorry, I'm going to be on a ship at that time because my in-laws were celebrating their 60th wedding anniversary. And they said, well, is there any way you can cancel the trip? And I'm like, no, it's my in-laws' wedding anniversary. I can't cancel this trip.
Were you not a little tempted though?
Oh, yeah. But, it's my husband, his mom and dad and their family. And I'm like, I can't cancel the trip. And they said, okay, well, send us your itinerary and we'll keep in touch by email because we're not sure if we are going to tape the show or not. So we fly up to Boston and we get on the ship on Saturday. we sail off. Sunday, I get an email from the director at Harpo Studios. We decided to run the show. We're going to fly you from Canada on Tuesday because the ship will dock Tuesday, and we'll fly you to Chicago.
Oh, so nice.
I had to get permission from the captain of the ship to get off the ship.
Well, I mean, you say it's Oprah, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. I said, it's Oprah.
Yeah, Oprah has made a request. Done.
Hello.
That's all you need to say.
Yeah. So I had to get permission. So at port, we were going to be at port on Tuesday. They had a taxi waiting for me, took me to the airport, and I get to Chicago. They have a stretch limo waiting for me. My husband stayed on the ship with his family, but I said, my husband's going to stay on the ship. Would you fly my sister up from Kansas City to join me in Chicago? Because I don't want to be alone. I'm scared to death. And they're like, sure. So they flew my sister from Kansas City to Chicago. They pick her up in a stretch limo.
Oh, nice.
I know. It was great. And we taped the show. I was on for the first 30 minutes. And I'm sitting next to my hero, my mentor.
That's amazing.
And, yeah.
That's amazing. And the show was about survivors.
It's about survivors. Yeah. And it was about incest survivors specifically.
Okay.
And the child abuse and how fathers or brothers and things like that. It was an incest show, which at the time I was still ashamed of what happened to me, because I would say I was a survivor of sexual abuse, but I wouldn't say the word incest because it's just an ugly word. Mm-hmm. But I'm not ashamed of that anymore. And so by me sharing my story, and now with you and your audience, you're going to get a lot of people saying, me too.
Yeah. And then you're someone who's going to give someone else the power to stand out. How do you go from, okay, you survive, you get to Oprah, you share your story. What made you decide you want to be an advocate now and be that voice for other people?
Something inside me it's my purpose. I don't know where it came from, Kwesi. I don't know if you know your purpose. I knew I wanted to become a professional speaker. I knew I wanted to speak out on these issues. I advocated at the state legislature to get legislation passed for the statute of limitations. So I've done a lot of things. I've done interviews, but now I'm doing a podcast called SurThriver Unleashed, and it's all about how recovery is possible after sexual abuse. So something's driving me. It's not me driving this ship. Something's driving me, pushing me, be on Oprah.
Divine force pushing through you, right?
It is. It really is. Divine force is pushing me. And so I'm just going how it flows. And did a TEDx talk too. So
yeah. And what was your TEDx talk on? It was on your story. And what was the message behind that?
Well, I'm going to have your audience go listen to the TEDx talk to hear the message. But the talk is called Healing from Sexual Abuse Can Start with One Word. And I am now I'm getting messages from male and female survivors from around the world thanking me for the message. Oh. And I had no idea it was going to have that kind of impact. I was hoping it would. I was thinking this is going to have this impact, and it is manifesting into this beautiful, beautiful message. And I even got, if you heard about Larry Nassar, the Olympian, I received a testimonial from one of his survivors thanking me for the talk.
Amazing. Yeah, I watched the Netflix show on, the horrible things that he did to those women. And I know that the main woman that came out, I think she's a speaker as well, Den Holler, right? Is her name?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is the main message that you would like to leave as your legacy, I guess I should say?
My main message is that we didn't do the crime. We have to stop doing the time. We must stop sabotaging and abusing ourselves after they have abused us. And to back up a little bit, the main message is that we have nothing to be ashamed of. I want survivors to focus on their courage, strength, tenacity to persevere. You know, the shame comes from the crime. The shame comes from the negative incidents, the trauma. And if we focus on the survival traits that helped us persevere during and after their crimes committed against us, that's what we should focus on. We should focus on our resilience. We should focus on how we survived. And survivors don't understand what courage it takes to live through what they've lived through. And I want them to be proud of themselves. That's what my message is. I want them to be proud of themselves, of their courage. Don't focus on the crime. It's not our fault. Focus on, wow, you made it. You survived. Now let's do something with it.
And you're the epitome, you're the example, the shining example of doing that. I like something that you wrote on your website. You said that a lot of people say they don't want to be defined by their story. And you say, no, I am defined by my story. Can you explain what you mean by that? Because a lot of people say that other line, but you switched it up.
Exactly. And that's what I want them to switch up. Switch up. When people say, well, don't let your past define you. And I'm like, oh, no. It does define me. The crime doesn't define me. My courage, strength, and tenacity to persevere is what defines me. So thank you for helping me articulate that, because that is what defines us, not what we went through, how we survived it and rise above it is what defines us.
And I can tell that, I mean, you defined it eloquently. I just need to prompt you, and then you said it perfectly. You obviously speak on this topic of surviving through thriving. I want to ask you, who do you speak to most, and what made you add on a speech coaching certification to the professional speaking career that you have?
Well, I went through Toastmasters to start working on my confidence and getting the courage of standing up in front of people. And I met Catherine, who was a certified speaking coach. And I loved her style, and we are now best friends. I know we are for life, but I'm like, I thought that by going through the process of the coaching program, I would learn how to become a better speaker too. So I was using it not really to become a coach, but now I've coached hundreds, thousands of people around the world for their message. And I also coach TEDx speakers. But so I didn't know that I was going to become a speaking coach. That's not what I set out to do. But I'm so glad I did. I love it. I love helping others find their voice. But really, the intention to go through the course was to help me better prepare and work on my public speaking.
Okay.
And then I turned it into a business.
Yeah, exactly. The business of speaking and the business of coaching.
Correct. And yeah.
Yeah, no, you've touched on it as well, but what would be the main thing that you love about speaking, and what would be the main thing that you love about coaching? So obviously speaking gives you something or you can give something through speaking, and you can give something through coaching. Why both?
Well, like I said, I didn't set out to be a coach, but I found my love of teaching and helping others find their voice. And it's so rewarding to see a client stand up in front of an audience to articulate their message clearly, specifically, and get the response that they're getting. And so being a coach, that is rewarding. And to me, Kwesi, part of the healing process is teaching others what we've learned.
Mm-hmm.
And so to become a teacher and a healer and a coach, because also, and I think you'll agree with this, even though we are teaching them specific skill sets on how to build a speech, we also have to work on mindset.
Yep.
So we're not only helping them with the structure, content, delivery of a speech, we are also helping them become more confident, help them come out of their cocoon to become the person that they want to be. So we're a mindset coach, we're a speaking coach, we're a life coach, we're a business coach, all kind of rolled into one. And we teach what we need to learn.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that you have clients from all different backgrounds. Without getting into specifics of whom, can you think of any examples of people who made you say, you know what, this is why I stand on my story and I'm out there helping people? Because I'm sure you have some people who have come up to you who, after hearing your story, that have told you some powerful ones as well.
Oh, absolutely. The day I was on stage and I gave my TEDx talk about my story, there was a young lady in the audience, and she came up to me and she said, I work at a crisis center, and my dad asked me to quit working there because he thought it was too emotional and traumatic for me. And I want you to meet my dad. After hearing your speech today, he looked at me and said, I don't want you to quit that job. Mm. And that was just so powerful. And actually, I think that's the first time I shared that story. So thanks for asking.
Yeah, no problem. I know that the power in your story must have garnered some responses that will never be forgotten. And that's one of them, right?
So, yeah. So her father could see the work that the crisis centers do, because I talk about reaching out to a crisis center because I was suicidal. Later that day, too, a 70-year-old woman came up to me and said, thank you for your story. I've never told anyone. And she was crying and hugged me. Can I hug you? And I'm like, of course. And so people are coming up afterwards. They're finding their voice to become a speaker, or they're finding their voice to finally get into counseling, to reclaim their life. So that's rewarding.
Yeah. And so take me where you are now. What does life look like for you now? Personally and professionally, where are you now?
Personally and professionally, life is great. I'm married. I have a fur baby. His little name is Dudley, my little dog. Personally, life is wonderful. Professionally, I'm still a speaking coach. But this past year, I haven't been out networking and doing a lot, as a lot of us haven't.
I think that's a common story.
Yeah. So I decided to put an online course, and it's called SurThriving After Sexual Abuse. Oh. And yes, and it's a positive program for survivors to help them become a SurThriver. Because I found that even though I went through counseling, I wasn't given the tools to keep priming my mind for success, to keep on a positive path. And so the tools and the lessons in the course is going to help survivors who have had counseling. They're not in crisis anymore, but they're still struggling with self-esteem, confidence, and maybe still self-sabotaging. But it's all the things that I've learned, and I'm putting it into an online program. I'm coaching survivors and still speech coaching. So that's what I'm doing. And I'm also doing a podcast called SurThriver Unleashed, where I am interviewing SurThrivers who have written a book, who are living a positive, happy, healthy, productive life, because I want to show survivors that recovery is possible. And I want them to see it.
And you want them absolutely to see it. If you don't mind me asking, if someone is where you were and they are contemplating, taking their own life, um, you're on their shoulder, you're in the room. What do you tell them to give them just a little bit of hope in that moment?
I haven't been with anybody directly in that
No, I'm not saying
situation.
that like literally, but if you were, what would you say?
Oh my goodness. I would listen without interruption or judgment, and I wouldn't leave until I knew that they got help. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a counselor, a medical person, but I would make sure that they sought help and had medical intervention. I would let them know that what they're doing, where they are, it's normal, it's okay.
Yeah.
They're not alone. And I have to tell you that, as I said, my TEDx talk, I am receiving messages from male and female survivors around the world. And I met a young man. He reached out from the UK in Scotland, and he said, I was suicidal. I was getting ready to take my life, and I saw your talk. And now he is involved in a program in Scotland. It's called the 70-30 campaign. And his name is Jay, and I'm going to let him watch this. And he is now a SurThriver and an advocate helping in Scotland to eliminate 70% of child sexual abuse by the year 2030.
Oh, that's what the 70-30 is. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, because I don't know, talk to me about the problem of child sexual abuse in the world. I know it's out there, I just don't know the gravity of it. Can you talk a bit about how severe it is in the world?
Your next door neighbor, a child could be sexually abused. In the United States, the statistics are 1 in 4 girls will be sexually abused before the age of 18. 1 in 4 women, 1 in 6 boys, but really the CDC says that number is quite low. And with their estimates, in the United States, we have 328 million people, but they estimate over 42 million adult survivors of child sexual abuse. And if you add rape to that and domestic violence, yeah.
So the numbers are probably underreported.
Very underreported.
Okay.
Because there's so much shame around it too. So what they say, for every 1 reported, 2 go unreported.
And has that number started to change with the Me Too movement? What kind of things are out there that are starting to turn the tide, if there are such things?
There are, and it is changing. And what was surprising, Kwesi, is with Facebook and social media and the Me Too movement, the hashtag Me Too, I was seeing so many friends and colleagues hashtag Me Too. That happened to me too. Mm-hmm. With the internet, it's helping people come out and get help. And I have a tagline that: get help, get healed, get happy, because we deserve it. But it is very prevalent. Incest is a very unreported incident, and we don't talk about it as much, but we are. And I just interviewed a young lady, and she has a program called Incest Aware, because she is an incest SurThriver. So there's a lot of us out there. We're talking about it. We have no more shame. We want to see an end to child sexual abuse and sexual assault of adults as well.
Absolutely. And when you said 1 in 4 females and then 1 in 6 males, the numbers aren't that far apart. I didn't realize it was that close, male to females. But thank God we have people like you out there speaking and helping people survive and thrive.
Thrive, right.
I'm so glad we met. I'm so glad that we've connected. I'm so glad that I have a new friend for life in you, absolutely. And when this is all over, hopefully we can actually meet in person and celebrate just life in general.
Exactly.
Uh,
Absolutely.
Yes. So before we finish off here, I want everyone to know, where can they find you everywhere? Tell us where to get your book, where to find you online, how to connect with you.
Yes, go to Rena, Rena Romano, ROMANO.com. And for the survivors, SurThrivers, I have 52 weeks of free affirmations that they can sign up for, and they can learn more about the classes. My books, I have a journal and my memoir. They both are on Amazon. And you can go to my website too and click on the links there. But Rena Romano, I'm all over Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, my website. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Titles of your books.
My books, His Puppet No More. Okay. That's my memoir. Very proud of that. And then I gotta
pick that up for sure.
Thank you. And my Thrive Journal. You send me your address, Kwesi. I will send you a copy of my book signed.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for your time, Rena, and thank you for everything you do, for being the brave person that you are and helping the thousands of people out there with this serious problem. And I appreciate you. Thank you.
I appreciate you. Thank you for having me on. I really am honored to be on the platform. Thank you.